So hello everybody, welcome to Talking with Gen Z. This is episode number 2. Hope you enjoyed episode number 1, although based on the comments it was pretty controversial. So we're going to talk about boomers, X, Y, and this group, which is my absolute favorite generation. This is Gen Z. Now, I will tell you that the boomers X and Y don't always have a lot of positive things to say about Gen Z. It's hard for them to say positive things about Gen Z. And there's a lot of channels on YouTube where they just interview randomly in Times Square Gen Z, and they say, how many dimes are in a dollar? And, you know, the poor girl gets ambushed and says, is a dime 10 or 5 cents? Like things like that. And then he says, no, it's 10. And she has issues answering. And then he says things like, what's 3 times 3 times 3? Like if I said that to you guys, what's 3 times 3 times 3?
27.
27. Okay, so you got it, right? But all these people that get interviewed in Times Square, they make Gen Z sound like a genetically inferior generation, which you are not. You are probably the best educated, most hope for the future. You give me tremendous hope for the future. In fact, I think you're phenomenal. And you are influencing the other generations up. The other generations are not influencing you at all. You're influencing them from the bottom up. So we're going to go through a few slides here. And I will start off with just looking at XYZ. And basically, the boomers X and Y, we all owe Gen Z an apology. Because Gen Z is phenomenal. You're really well educated. You're focused on diversity. It's funny, if I showed you a picture of a boardroom and it was all older white males, you would notice it, that there's no diversity. But in our everyday lives, you guys don't notice diversity because you just expect it. But if I showed you a boardroom with all white male executives, you would notice that and say, hey, where's the diversity? It's not there, right? So you guys, I tend to call you idea people. So idea people, first of all, you're well educated and you're all smart. So you're the idea comes from inclusive, diverse, character, accepting. There's, in politics today, there's the do-gooders, which tend to be the liberals, and then there's the iconoclasts, which are all about keeping their wealth. And politics is totally bifurcated into those two groups. But you guys are impatient, distracted, entitled, and apathetic. Now that's idea. And all of those things are great. Now why are you impatient? First of all, we gave you a bunch of devices. Now all the devices we gave you, you're addicted to. It's because of dopamine. I mean, 13-year-old girls check their Instagram 47 times a day. It's the FOMO, fear of missing out, but all of these devices actually do have you pretty addicted to the devices. So you're impatient, you want to change things fast, which is good because you're going to have to change the world because the boomers and X and Y have left you with a ton of problems. I mean, we have global warming, we have pollution, we have food insecurity. There's the 1% that have all the wealth, and then the other 99% that don't. So I see the impatience, the distractedness, a little bit of entitled, and the apathetic. They're all positives. Boomers may view you as negative. Most of them do. But I think you are overwhelmed with the electronic devices. You're addicted to the dopamine from these devices. You tend to want instant gratification, but that comes from the devices. Now, you're willing to fail. You're not afraid of failure. You have a kill switch. And this generation, college and employment may not be the be-all, end-all. Some of you may get great jobs with Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, but you might only stay there for 4 or 5 years, and then you might start your own gig. You're very entrepreneurial. And I find that Gen Z often prefers the entrepreneurialism. We've talked about FIRE before, becoming financially independent, FIRE, financially independent, retire early. But once you do that, your generation tends to, and most of you will have 3 jobs in your first 10 years. Whereas if I look at the millennials have split in 2. One group got a job, got married, and had kids, and bought their own home. The other half of the millennials are still living in their parents' basement. And they're disgruntled, and they're angry, and they're entitled. They're angry at the boomers for not giving them a job. And the ones who think that they're the most entitled are the millennials themselves, because the ones that got jobs are angry at the ones that are living in their parents' basements. So they've kind of split in 2, which is an interesting phenomenon. So if you look at Gen Z, I actually think it's the most phenomenal generation that we have. The boomers have left you with a ton of problems. And I feel sorry for you guys. I don't know if you recognize all the problems that you've been left with, but we have global warming, homelessness. I was talking to a boomer on the weekend, and he said, let's just rename them outside people, then there's no problem. I mean, that's not a solution, and it's kind of cynical. But the boomers have left you guys with global warming, homelessness, food insecurity, and you got to solve all these problems. So, they talk about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You guys might not have the complete opportunity for the pursuit of happiness, because you got to solve all these problems. And it's not your fault that they left you with all these things. So are you unlikely to achieve life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness? I don't think so. I think you can still do it because you're the most well-educated, well-prepared generation I've ever seen. I think that maybe they did some misguided, standardized tests, and that stole the dream from some of the Gen Z, but not you. I think the majority of you will be just fine. I think the apathetic part comes from the fact that we tended to feed the younger generation so much processed food. Believe it or not, a lot of that processed food can affect you. But you are actually watching you on a day-to-day basis. You eat pretty healthy. You're into plant-based, healthy options. Plus, a lot of you are athletic. You're athletes, so you eat differently, which is good because you're not eating a lot of processed food, which the boomers and Gen X created for you. So X and Y incorrectly portray that you lack general knowledge. Now, there's a lot of YouTubers out there, and they're primarily Gen X and Y social media influencers. And there's tons of channels, and I'll just call out a couple. There's Klug, Elder, Sinek, and Walsh. Now, they'll ambush a Gen Z in Times Square and say, how many dimes are there in a dollar? How many dimes are there in a dollar? 10. So you got it. Now, how many nickels are there in a dollar? 20. You got it. Okay. What 2 countries border the U.S.? Canada and Mexico. Okay. Name 2 countries other than the U.S. China and Russia. Okay, so all of these are things that Gen Z couldn't do when they had a camera stuck in their face in Times Square. So, which is not fair, but I think we owe Gen Z a retraction. I think they do. Because they're dead wrong. Street interviews are portraying Gen Z as ignorant, lacking general knowledge and facts, and you're the best educated generation there is. You're phenomenal. You're the most educated generation ever. So how many stars are there on the U.S. flag?
50.
50. What two countries border the U.S.? We just did that. That was Canada and Mexico, and you got it. These are questions that they've used over and over and over in Times Square to prove that Gen Z has no idea what their general knowledge should be, and that they have poor general knowledge. So these YouTubers, Klug, Elder, Cynic, and Walsh, kind of owe Gen Z an apology. And Gen Z is actually influencing the older generations very positively. And the rate of change is accelerating. So what's any number to the power of 0? This is a really tough question. It's 1, and you got that. 3 countries besides the United States. You already said Russia, China, Spain. So you got that. How many dimes make up a dollar? 10. Who fought in the Civil War? Now, this was a question that got asked. Now, in the Civil War, who was it?
The Confederacy and the Union.
Yeah, Confederacy and the Union. It was the North and the South. And then what does 3 times 3 times 3 equal?
27.
27. So these are questions that they said Gen Z can't answer, and they did the interviews in Times Square, and they couldn't. So millennials, from my perspective, millennials are the ones who are lazy, selfish, entitled. I call them snowflakes. They're soft emotionally. Now, I had to do an interview. They had parents who were like, I call them snowplow parents, or sometimes they're called helicopter parents. They didn't allow their children to fail at anything. I mean, I went to a baseball game and I said, "What's the score?" They said, "Oh, we don't keep score. That would be hard on them. Everybody just gets a participation ribbon. So there's no score. It's just a participation ribbon." So when I was working at this large corporation, I had to interview this young man for a job, just graduated university. And he said, "Oh, can I bring my mother to the interview?" And I said, "No, you can't bring your mother to the interview." But he apparently couldn't do anything without his mother, because when he showed up to the interview, he was essentially a blithering idiot. I mean, he couldn't answer anything because his mother wasn't there. So I think that the millennials kind of, their parents organized their play dates, they organized their lives. That didn't happen to Gen Z. But they're kind of soft emotionally. They're also the millennials. Now, there's 2 groups. I said the millennial are Y. They've split into one group that have careers, got married, and homes. And the other group is living in their parents' basement. So they're the ones that are clinging to side parts, skinny jeans, Facebook, Harry Potter, Eminem. And there's a lot of angry rants on YouTube. And these are millennials going on angry rants and just totally annihilating Gen Z, because you reach your coolest, I think, when you're 20, and they're just hanging on to these things. And they're just hanging on to these things, and they won't let them go. And they really need to, because you guys have taken over. So your parents were not helicopter snowplow parents. I think Gen Y were reinforced and shaped. I remember walking into this public school, and there was a sign up over the mirror, and it said, "You are the most amazing, best generation ever. You are looking at the most important person in the world." And I'm like, what kind of a message are you teaching these kids? Like, they were endlessly told and shaped that they were brilliant and beautiful, but they might not have been. And so it just created a weird generation, and that's the Gen Y, who is now doing interviews in Times Square, criticizing Gen Z, which is you guys, for not having common knowledge. So your parents were a little bit different. And when it came to Gen Z, things went amazingly well. Now, Gen Y was born 1980 to 1986, approximately. And I think that Gen Z, you were born 1996 to 2015, roughly. But Gen Z parents, they let you fight your own fights. They kind of let you fight your own fights. So, and it's in green on the screen. It just says Gen Z parents let their children fight their own fights, battle their own battles. They were stealth parents. And because of that, Gen Z is very independent. I have a friend who lets her 9-year-old daughter ride the subway in New York to school. And the other parents are mortified, but she's completely independent, safe, and feels like she can accomplish anything. So Gen Z, I think, is my hope for America. It's your passion is saving America. Now, you experienced 9/11 in 2001. You experienced the financial crisis in 2008, when a lot of families lost their homes and went through financial hardships. You dealt with that. You've also had to deal with school shootings, which the boomers and X never really had to deal with a school shooting. They don't know what taking an active shooter course or active shooter preparation is, which you guys do. You also had a lot of whiplash. I can't possibly see more whiplash than going from Obama to Trump. I mean, that was whiplash that you had to experience and endure, which was dramatic. And you're also a lot more socially conscious. You're socially conscious. You, I think, want to help make the world a better place, and I think you will make the world a better place. I have every confidence that you will. You've experienced a lot more trauma. Just the 9/11. Now, maybe you were very young, but the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Center, and then the financial crisis in 2008. That kind of made you tougher. And I think you are a tougher generation of virtual doers. And you're going to have to do something, because the boomers, X and Y, have left you with a ton of problems. I mean, do you feel like you've been left unfairly with a bunch of problems that you have to solve in any way? Maybe?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of weight on your shoulders that are things that you have to solve. So there is pressure on you, but I have every confidence that this generation, you're the best educated, you have the best common knowledge, general knowledge, you're socially conscious. I just have every confidence that if anybody can solve all the problems of the world and make this planet a more beautiful place, a more diverse place, you guys are the generation that are going to do it. Unfortunately, on YouTube, there's too many people slamming Gen Z when everybody should be apologizing to Gen Z for the way you've been portrayed. And all the people that can't say anything nice about Gen Z are just dead wrong. All right, so thanks a lot for your time. This is the end of episode number 2 in Talking with Gen Z. So look forward to seeing you in episode number 3. Thanks to everybody for participating today, and we'll see you soon.